For Harrison Ford, Callista was never just a third marriage. She was the quiet proof that even legends, weathered, scarred, nearly broken, can one day find calm waters and a harbor where the heart, at last, is allowed to rest. For decades, Harrison Ford had built his legend on indestructibility. He was the man who never stayed down, the rogue who outran empires, the archaeologist who cheated death with a whip and a grin. His body was his greatest ally, lean, restless, tireless. He was the face of resilience itself, a symbol of what it meant to be untouchable. But legends are written in celluloid, not in flesh. And flesh, no matter how strong, eventually betrays. The betrayals began quietly, with the aches and bruises that come from decades of stunts performed out of sheer defiance. Ford had always refused to let a double take his place. If Indiana Jones was to dangle from trucks or wrestle atop speeding trains, it had to be him. Authenticity was his creed. That stubbornness won him the awe of generations, but it also left behind scars no camera would ever capture. Ligaments torn, bones cracked, muscles that healed badly yet were forced to move again. By the time he reached his 70s, each stride carried the weight of old battles. Each breath whispered the cost of refusing to bend. Still, he pressed on. "I wanted it to be me," he once said. "If the audience was going to believe, it had to be me." Then came June 2014, a day that shattered the illusion. On the set of Star Wars, The Force Awakens, inside the Millennium Falcon, the ship that had carried him to cinematic immortality, a hydraulic door failed and came crashing down. The blow shattered his leg, pinning him beneath the very icon that defined him. For a stunned crew, the image was unbearable. Han Solo, the hero who once outran the Empire, broken not by stormtroopers or blasters, but by a machine of steel. The set fell into silence, production halted, and the myth lay wounded before their eyes. Ford was rushed into surgery, and though the world would later see him laugh it off on television, demonstrating the mishap with a toy model, those who had stood in that studio never forgot the sight. The irony cut deep. The ship that had made him eternal had also revealed his fragility. For the first time, the line between legend and man was torn open, and on the other side was only pain. Barely a year later, the illusion cracked wider. In March 2015, flying one of his beloved vintage planes, Ford suffered catastrophic engine failure. The aircraft plummeted and slammed into a golf course in Los Angeles. The wreckage was twisted beyond recognition, the scene a jarring echo of finality. For minutes that felt like hours, the world believed the story had ended. News bulletins flared. Had the indestructible finally fallen? Callista Flockhart, his wife, would later confess to living those hours in terror. "I thought I'd lost him," she whispered, recalling her vigil outside the ICU. To the world, Ford's survival was a miracle. To Callista, it was a resurrection. Yet survival came with a shadow. The man who had once embodied eternal youth had stared into the abyss of mortality and returned, not untouched, not unscarred, but altered. Ford recovered. Yes, he walked again, he flew again, he even returned to the sets that had once demanded his blood and sweat. But the look in his eyes had shifted. Beneath the gravelly humor and stoic shrugs, there lingered an unspoken truth. For the first time in his life, he had been forced to acknowledge the betrayal of his own body. A body that had carried him through battles on screen, that had leapt from cliffs and dodged rolling boulders, now revealed itself for what it was: mortal, fallible, fragile. What broke him in those years was not just the crash of a door or a plane. It was the cruel realization that no legend can outrun time. And for Harrison Ford, the man who had spent decades teaching us to believe in heroes, that was perhaps the deepest wound of all. And still, the body asked more from him. In 2021, at nearly 80, he tore his shoulder rehearsing a fight scene on the set of Indiana Jones and The Dial of Destiny. Production halted for weeks as he endured surgery and slow rehabilitation. The irony was cruel. Indiana Jones, once the eternal adventurer, had been undone not by snakes, rolling boulders, or ancient curses, but by time itself. When he finally returned to set, cameras captured the truth. His frame leaner, his movements slower, his face carved with lines of triumph and suffering. Yet when the director called action, something in him still ignited. For a few fleeting hours, Ford was Indy again, defying time with every swing of the whip, every narrowing of the eyes. He often shrugs off questions about aging with gravelly humor. It beats the alternative. But those closest to him see the truth. Callista notices the stiffness when he rises, the care in each step, the pauses he once never needed. At night, she hears him stir awake from old aches. And Ford himself, in private, has confessed the cruel irony. The man who once embodied eternal youth now lives in a body that betrays him daily. Cannes 2023 made it visible to the world. As audiences roared for Indiana Jones 5, they were not just celebrating a film. They were saying goodbye to a man who had given them his body, piece by piece, until it was no longer whole. And yet, this is what makes his story so profoundly human. The door that crushed him, the crash that nearly ended him, the surgeries, the slow betrayals of time. They are not failures, but sacrifices. Each scar is proof of a man who refused to retreat, who chose to spend himself for his art and his audience. Where others withdrew, Ford stood taller, insisting that he would go down fighting, even if his battlefield was now his own body. In the quiet of their Wyoming ranch, Callista sometimes watches him, older, slower, but still restless in spirit, and marvels at the will that refuses to dim. He doesn't know how to stop, she has said. Perhaps that is why the world loves him still, because his fragility makes his resilience more luminous. This, then, is the final arc of the legend. Not the smuggler who laughed in the face of empires, not the archaeologist who outwitted time, but the man who has outlived his myths, carrying scars where others carried applause. His tragedies are not just accidents, but inevitabilities. The slow surrender of flesh to age, the cruel reminder that even heroes break. And yet, Ford endures. Not untouched, not unscarred, but unbroken in spirit. His body may falter, but his defiance remains, and in that defiance lies a different kind of immortality. Perhaps the truest heroism was never about pretending to be indestructible. It was about standing, scarred and mortal, and daring to keep going. For those who grew up watching him leap, fight, and soar, it is almost unbearable to see him falter. But in his faltering, Harrison Ford has given us one last gift, the mirror of our own humanity. Fragile, resilient, unforgettable. At 83 years old, Harrison Ford lives surrounded by wealth most could never imagine, yet shadowed by aches, silences, and memories that no fortune can erase. His net worth climbs past $300 million. His name rests on properties that stretch from the Brentwood Hills of Los Angeles to a Manhattan penthouse, from the wide skies of his beloved Wyoming ranch to hangars housing vintage planes and sleek jets. He owns Jaguars that purr with history, Mercedes built for speed, Teslas that glide in silence, and a Cessna Sovereign worth more than entire lifetimes of work. To the world, it looks like the portrait of victory. The boy who once built cabinets for rent money now holds an empire of his own. And yet, those who know him best understand the irony. Harrison Ford has never lived smaller, quieter, or more withdrawn. In Wyoming, on that sprawling 800-acre ranch, half of which he donated as a conservation easement, he chooses stillness over spectacle. The Hollywood lights that once followed his every step now flicker only occasionally, at a Cannes premiere or a rare red carpet appearance. Most days, he is not a star, but a man in boots, walking the land, tending to the silence, finding comfort in the rhythm of nature. He has built an empire, but what he craves is not more, only less. Less noise, less demand, less performance. His home is with Callista Flockhart, the woman who has walked beside him for more than 2 decades, and with Liam, the son she adopted before meeting him, a boy Ford long ago embraced as his own. There are no children born from this marriage, no new chapters of fatherhood to distract from old regrets. Instead, there is a quieter redemption. Dinners at the ranch, shared laughter by the fire, the sense that, at last, he is present. After years of absence, through fame, through filming, through fractured families, he has learned to sit, to listen, to stay. But even in this sanctuary, the body tells its truths. At over 80, Ford bears the weight of 1,000 stunts and more than a few miracles of survival. His leg still stiffens from the day the Millennium Falcon's door crushed him on the set of The Force Awakens. His shoulder aches with the memory of 2021, when Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny nearly ended before it began. And though he walks with the steady stride of a man refusing to yield, those close to him see the slowness, the caution, the pauses. He still works out, still flies planes, still maintains the discipline of a body long pushed beyond its limits. Yet every reflection in the mirror whispers the same truth. The indestructible man has grown old. Cannes 2023 made that truth visible to the world. As he stepped onto the stage for the premiere of Indy's last adventure, thunderous applause rose to meet him. But in that applause was more than celebration. It was farewell. Fans saw not just Indiana Jones, whip in hand, but Harrison Ford, eyes wet with emotion, his voice unsteady as he admitted, "I'm deeply moved." It was not just gratitude, it was goodbye, the acknowledgement of a chapter closing not on film, but in life. Still, to speak only of pain would miss the deeper arc of his twilight. For even as his body betrays him, Ford continues to give himself away. Not to box office glory, but to causes that will outlast him. As Vice Chair of Conservation International, he has fought for rainforests and rivers with the same stubbornness he once fought for authenticity on set. He has donated land to protect nature, lent his voice to environmental campaigns, and risked his reputation to speak uncomfortable truths about climate change. Long before activism was fashionable, he used his wealth to preserve something larger than himself. And in that, perhaps, lies the measure of the man. Not the planes or the cars, not even the films, but the forests, the skies, the wild places that will remain when he no longer walks among them. There is also the Private Ford, the man who once rushed into danger to assist with real-life rescue flights,